reason that at the margin, marginal analysis, big part of economics, some of you are not coming. Says, I can watch the lecture online. That's fine. Again, I don't mind if you take this course like it's an online course, as long as it's working for you. But make sure you're not in denial. Right? If you miss class and that causes you to start to get behind and have problems, and then you keep missing class, you are in denial and not on a river in Africa. Okay, that's a big deal. All right, we're going to zip through these PowerPoints, and I mean that literally, because I'm assuming evidence to the contrary that you've at least skimmed through the book and you're familiar with at least some of the terms and you have some idea what's working and what's not, what needs clarification, what's not, and based on having done this for 30 years, there's some things that I think I absolutely better explain in class, and there's other things that, don't need to. I may be in denial on some of those. I don't think so, but we're diverse. So I may think it should be working for you based on what's just written here in your book, but it may not be. Also, notice if you're printing up the PowerPoints, well, two things. One thing is you may notice, like in this last thing, wait a minute, that's not on my PowerPoint. One of the ways that I get ready for class is by tinkering with the PowerPoints. Okay, so sometimes I add a word, maybe even a whole line on there. Oh well. Now, if you have the thing as I've recommended, the PowerPoint's printed up, and you have it like on 3 frames on a sheet, and then some stuff on the side where you can write. So you can write in that last little phrase there. Okay, which is a good thing to do. All right, so we've done this a little bit already, this equilibrium thing, and some of my explanation of supply and demand I've been drawing up on the board, which is a good reason to sit closer, because otherwise you might not be able to see it very well, and including both the supply and demand line on the same graph. But now here we are in chapter 4, where the book actually starts to do that, combining the supply lines, which is about sellers, okay, and the demand line, which is only about buyers, into a single graph that says, put those folks together, and the seller's trying to maximize profit, and the buyer's trying to make the best deal that they can for themselves. Combine that into a marketplace, and you end up eventually with what we call an equilibrium price and quantity. Now, I say eventually because the market is seemingly not in equilibrium all that often. It's probably moving towards an equilibrium more often than it's actually in one. And the reason for that is because of those 14 shifters that we talked about last week and part of the week before, right? 7 demand shifters and 7 supply shifters. Almost always one of those is doing something, causing the demand line to shift, causing the supply line to shift. And so that disequilibrates the market, creates a shortage or a surplus, and then the market adjusts to a new equilibrium, and by the time it gets there, something else may have shifted. Okay, so the equilibrium notion is at least as important to understand for the process of getting there as what's going on when you get there. Okay, the journey is at least as important as the destination, is another way of saying the same thing. All right, let me go ahead and draw that up on the board again, because it's one thing to go back and forth between slides, which is kind of a drag. I can just point to it on the board. Okay, so quantity per time period, million barrels per day. Should have a time frame per day, duh. Anyway, always got a quantity per a time period here, and then the units, like tons or gallons or barrels per day, has got to be the same thing. Dollars per unit. Now, usually it's just price, but sometimes we put more than a price up here. Put marginal cost. Marginal cost, what's that? Well, it comes up later in the semester. That's what the supply line is. And the supply line is an indication of the seller's opportunity costs at the margin, which means for one more, what opportunity cost do I incur? That's all at the margin means. Okay, and it should start above the origin most of the time, except that water case. And later this week, try it. I think it's supposed to rain, right? Fall is supposed to finally sort of come. Fall in San Antonio in the low 90s, but anyway, that's our fall. All right, and then there's the demand for the buyers. And eventually, after the dust settles, should I call it 0 or E? For now, I'll call it E. Equilibrium quantity. And then I could call it 0 indicating now. That would be convenient because then if I want to make a shift, then there's an equilibrium later. But for now, we'll just leave it this way. Okay, so sooner or later, market forces will push the price to this level, which will cause the market to clear. What does the market clear? See, those are all those things that if I don't explain them, raise your hands and, Doc, you said market clear. What does that mean?
When you say clear, do you mean go to the equilibrium price? Is that what you're mean?
No. I'm glad you asked. See, the equilibrium price causes the market to clear. So, I mean, the causation is the other way. When the price moves to eventually get to this point, and most books oversimplify it and just, let's say the price starts out for some reason to be high. It will fall to this level. It'll probably fall below that level first, kind of like a bouncing ball, and it'll eventually settle into here. Because you see, even in the modern world with the internet, if the sellers are not able to clear their inventory, see, there's where the word clear, they're not able to sell all they produced, what do? They lower their prices, right? How low? How do they know how low to lower them, to clear it all out? They don't. It's an iterative kind of, it's an iterative process where let's try this much. Oops, that was a little too low. Let's raise it. Oops, that's a little too high still. And eventually it settles in. And oh, darn it, by then the market's shifted again, and they've got to do it all over again. It's kind of exciting out there to run a business, right? Because you're constantly adjusting to changing conditions. And sometimes it's so exciting, it's scary because you think you're going bankrupt, and you might be. Okay, so market clearing, let me just explain that one more time. The price changes so as to clear the market, which means so that the sellers sell all that they have available. Okay, so you say available, they can make more. Well, that's in the long run. Okay, the price rises and falls to clear what is available, what they've made already. See, and then based on what price that took to clear what they had made, they decide next period how much more to make. See? So they learn from the price system how much to make in the long run. But in the short run, the price rises and falls to clear the market, to clear out what was available. Okay, so the price change, make sure it all gets sold in the short run, and then based on that, the producers and consumers decide on the long run how much they want to buy or how much they want to sell. It's an information exchange process, the price system. Okay? The price contains a phenomenal amount of information. Later today, hopefully I'll remember, I'm going to post a little video that I happened to re-encounter on the internet last night. Milton Friedman talking about a pencil. It's pretty interesting, talking about how the price system coordinates all the things that go into making a crummy little, what does the pencil cost, $0.25 nowadays? I haven't had to buy one in a while. I just go down to the department supply thing and get mine. But anyway, 25 cents moves rubber from one part of the world and wood from another part and paint and graphite and combines it. Could you make a pencil for even $1 worth of your time? No, not even close. But somewhere out there, somebody's making good money at 25 cents a pencil. Has to move stuff from all over the world to do it. Amazing. Anyway, I'm going to put that up there so you can watch Milton Friedman talk about it. He does a lot better job of it than I do. All right. I've got these slides up here mostly to make sure I don't miss anything. I've already talked about some of the stuff that's on later slides. Okay, so I'm just kind of cruising through here, making sure I don't. I want you to read that and make sure, Doc, I don't remember you saying anything about this, because I think I did, but I may not have from your perspective. That's what matters. You are the customer. Okay, so now we've got some numbers here. Equilibrium price, quantity, where the lines intersect. Again, the process of getting there is at least as important as the fact that you end up where the lines cross. Okay, so what does a free market mean? Well, it means no outside interference. It means the buyer beware, right? And the seller beware, and all of that. Right? You try to make the best deal you can, and if you're a seller, you try to cover your expenses at least, and maybe make a profit. Okay, so let's suppose in my graph here, it'll come up on the screen too, that the demand increases. Okay, so 0 is before 1, so this is later. Okay, so now the demand has increased. Now what's going on? The sellers don't automatically just get an email or a phone call that says, hey, the demand increased, raise your price. No, the way this works is suddenly, at the price they were used to, and this was at the price they were used to, now they're selling it faster than they were used to. Okay, now there's what? A shortage. The market is clearing faster than the new stuff is being made available. And the sellers, they want to make money and they think they can raise prices. They will. Just about every one of them out there is trying to figure out some way to get you to pay more for what they're producing. Okay? But fortunately for us as buyers, they're constrained by competition. Okay? So they say, I better not charge more than this or I will make less money rather than more. All right, so anyway, so there's now suddenly a shortage. Okay? And as happens with a shortage, the sellers say, I can charge more, so they start raising price. They don't know by how much to raise price, they just raise them some. And when they do that, some of the buyers say, no, higher price, no thanks, don't want it. Okay, so that's a little arrow there. Okay, and the sellers say, if I can sell this for more money, I'll put more out on the shelf. So the quantity supplied increases. And gradually, they'll discover, if something else doesn't shift, in the meantime, they'll discover the new equilibrium price. That clears the market at a larger quantity. Now think about that a little bit. The sellers are now able to charge more than a price they were happy with. Okay, I mean, they were PE0. Could not have been an equilibrium price unless the majority of sellers were at least doing okay, profit-wise. Now the majority of sellers are doing really, really, really well, right, at this higher price. So what's going to happen? In Cajun, expansion. Okay, and others, those not in the business of producing this product at the moment, will say, that was a pretty attractive price. Not quite enough to induce me to be in that market. Wow, this is a really cool price. Okay, so they'll enter this market and then the supply will shift out. I will wait till later to draw that. This comes up later in the later slides. Okay, and so probably the equilibrium will eventually be right here. If nothing has changed about the opportunity cost of making this good, eventually competition will push the price back down to what had been just fine before. Okay, so the market mechanism is a two-stage process. Eliminate shortages and surpluses after shifts. That's the first part of the process. And then exit and entry based on how profitable the new price is. Okay, so rations out what's available in the short run, right? Make sure what's available clears out of there. And then it provides information and incentives to potential producers and potential consumers for the long run. Yeah, that's the price system that we take for granted, and most people don't even know what it does until they interfere with it. See, that's that thing about the no outside interference. That's when they discover how important it is. When some rocket scientist says, prices are going up, maybe because the government's printing too much money. We better put a lid on that and not keep those greedy sellers from raising their prices. Yeah, then suddenly things disappear. In fact, that's one of the little jokes, although it's not funny when it actually happens in economics, is price controls make things disappear. Yeah, they do. In fact, anytime you interfere with the market pricing mechanism, put a lid on it, say can't go any higher, or put a floor on it, which means you can't go any lower. Anytime you do that, exchange is reduced. In other words, the amount of trade, the amount of stuff that goes from seller to buyer is reduced. The market equilibrium price maximizes exchange, maximizes the amount that goes from low opportunity cost sellers to high opportunity cost buyers. What does that mean in terms of that pencil that you're hopefully going to watch Milton Friedman talk about? Moves stuff from low opportunity cost sellers to high opportunity. Somebody that wants a pencil, okay, ends up doing business with somebody that is producing gazillions of pencils and can make money selling them at 10 or 15 or 20 cents each. And if they're selling retail at 25 cents, the person that's mass producing them is probably selling them to the bookstore at 10 or 15 cents and saying, yeah, cool, making tons of money. There's no way you could do that. They have low opportunity cost for making pencils because they've invested in machines and business relationships that allow them to make gazillions of pencils at a couple pennies each. And you want a pencil or two, but your opportunity cost for making one is phenomenally high, so there's no way you're going to make one, and you're very thankful that you can buy one from someone. Okay. So, just to kind of recapitulate, eventually there's a market equilibrium formed at, the original before the D1 line, and then, darn it, we had stability. Darn it, somebody had to mess it up, right, and increase demand, and now that equilibrium price is no longer going to clear the market. Now there's a shortage. Doesn't last long. Right? Shortages do not persist in free markets because the price will change and the price increases, and bingo, we have a new equilibrium price that's higher and the quantity is larger in the short run. Right? The amount available was not enough at PE0 given the increased demand, but at the higher price, Q1 is enough. Exactly enough. Yes?
So the companies, do they primarily target equilibrium?
No, they have no idea what the equilibrium is. They're just trying to sell their output at any given moment for as much as they can, but they don't want it to sit there and gather dust either. It may be perishable, so they've got to get it out the door at whatever price they can. But then they refigure on the long run whether they should keep making as much or making more in the next period, based on what they could sell it for.
And how would they know that they are in equilibrium?
They know when they're able to sell the amount that they want to sell. In other words, the amount that they put out there is the exact amount, roughly, not exactly, roughly, the amount that actually does sell. You see, if they're able to sell it faster than they're making it, they say, well, I could raise my prices. And they're always eager to make more money, and so they do. Look on your face, I'm not sure that was a thumbs up. See, that's the thing I was saying about the email or the telephone. The sellers are not in communication. They have no idea what the market equilibrium price is if the old equilibrium no longer is. They just know which way to raise or which way to move their price, either up or down. Okay? If it's moving faster than they've been making it, they say, well, I better raise my price, or I can, probably. They don't know how much to raise it. They're going to be cautious. If they raise it a lot, they're going to lose a bunch of customers. So they may raise it a little bit, or they just may eliminate the discounts that they had. Okay, and just charge the hotels have what's called a rack rate, which almost no one ever pays. Okay, but it's sort of theirs, their official price, and then they discount away from that. Well, they just eliminate the discounts. Okay, or at least smaller discounts as a way to effectively raise their prices. Okay, so they know which way to go, they just don't know how far. So they just kind of feel their way along, and okay, well, that didn't quite clear it out there. We're still selling it faster than we're making it, a little higher. Okay, whoops, a little too far. Right, so it's like a bouncing ball. It just they sort of iterate around. That's what maybe I shouldn't use the term iterate. They just kind of feel their way around to where what the right price is. And see, in a business that's not as totally competitive as it might be, the businesses are reacting to each other. Okay, the one firm says, well, let's see, if Jones doesn't raise his prices too much, I can do this. But if he does raise his price, then I can do that. So they're kind of looking back and forth. But in a competitive business, there's too many for them to do that. But in an industry where there's like 4 or 5 or 6 other main sellers, like in airlines, they have to kind of monitor what each other is doing to know what the right price is. Later on in the semester, we'll get to talk about imperfectly competitive businesses and how that works. For now, in fact, I'm glad you raised the issue here. I should say we're assuming competitive conditions in our discussion so far. Okay, we're assuming that there's lots of buyers and sellers. And the most important element of a competitive situation is lots of buyers and sellers, although that's helpful. Easy entry, easy exit. That's the key to competition. It's easy to get in the business if you want to, okay, or it's easy to get out of it if you don't want to be in there. Okay, see, like at the new price there, Okay? If this price was okay, and it had to be okay for the majority for it to be an equilibrium at one point, and when the price goes up to here, that's going to induce a lot of market entry, right? Because this price was decently profitable. This one's going to be wildly profitable. And all else equal, businesses like to be wildly profitable. They will be attracted to compete in that business, and that will eventually drive prices down. And that's the market's way of screaming enough. Right? It's when businesses start to enter this market, because of the PE1 higher attractive price, the supply line shifts to the right. That'll drive the price down. How far down is it going to go? Well, until it's no longer profitable to enter that market. See, that's the market's way. The declining price with market entry is the market's way of screaming enough. Okay? Or the rising price is a way of screaming more. Make more. The buyers are sending unmistakable message tied to an incentive. Make more when the price is going up. It's a very, very efficient communication process. As it says up here, no outside interference. When we interfere with it, then we begin to have problems. For example, when we imagine that those evil landlords are charging too much rent, we say, let's pass a law and cap the rental price of apartments. Okay, sounds good. Ka-ching, boop. What's that noise? That's like the voting machine where I go to vote. It does that when I... That's so easy, right? Wouldn't you do this if it would save you $100 a month on rent? Oh, no sweat, right? Easy. Yeah, what happens? Well, maybe if you already have an apartment, maybe, the passage of the lower rent saves you some money. What if you're looking for one? Forget about it. Right? Supply line slopes upward. Lower price, fewer apartments. And more demand for them, too. Quantity demanded. Right? Lower price, more people want their own. Huh? Suddenly a shortage. And now the price can't go up because the law says that, this is the limit. We've got some serious outside interference now. And also, whenever there's a shortage, the quality declines of something because they can get away with selling all they want of a cheaper product. Right? People are standing in line waiting for something. The seller can easily get away with cheapening it a little bit and still selling all they have. So that's one of the things that economists don't disagree on. The joke about all the things economists do disagree on. Well, one thing that they do agree on, don't disagree on, is about the connection between shortages and quality. Quality goes down if shortages persist. See, what I've drawn up here, that's not going to lower quality, right? Because this shortage with this shift is not going to persist. The price will go up. But if it persists, then the sellers will adjust not by raising prices, but reducing quality. Okay, so here's a case where what would cause the excess supply? Well, it says it right there. If the demand goes down, D with the down arrow, or supply, the up arrow. It's a little, remember, don't draw the S line up. That's a decrease in supply. Okay, supply increase is what the S of the arrow means there. That's how you end up with a temporary excess supply of something. Okay, and then the market adjusts by lowering price, right, to move out what's going to otherwise sit around there and be unsold merchandise. And whether it's perishable or not, businesses cannot tolerate for very long unsold merchandise because they've got money in it, tied up in it. They've got to get some of that back. And if they can't get very much of it back, that's when they pull the plug and say, we're done. But they try to get as much as they can back in the short run, and then they assess whether they want to stay in business or make more or make less. Okay, again, in capital letters at the bottom there. The key thing that prices do doesn't take any machinery, doesn't take a bureaucracy, it just does it on its own. It's an impersonal, decentralized process. It happens because people are pursuing self-interest, which we can always rely on people doing. Okay, the price rises or falls to ration out what's available. Okay, in this case, with a demand decrease or a supply increase, it will fall to establish a new lower price. And at that point, some of the sellers may say, I'm out of here. Right? I was just barely getting by at the old price, now it's lower. I'm history. See, and that's the market mechanism regulating resources between markets. And lower price says, hey, some of you, the marginal producers, out of here and go do something else. Yeah, that's what's being said, and that's what happens. Right? A lower price, right, if it's seen to be persistently new and lower price, not going to rebound quickly, is a unmistakable telegram to the marginal producer. What do I mean by marginal producer? Those with the opportunity costs closest to what price they're getting. Right? They're just kind of on the brink of either making it or not getting it. Okay, getting enough to stay in business, and then the lower price pushes them over the edge, and they said, I got to find something else to do for a living. Every market always contains buyers and sellers at the margin, which means barely willing to buy it or barely willing to sell it at the going rate. Okay, fishing for questions. That's another thing about that Africa Queen thing. It's on a river, right? Fishing. Got to get that metaphoric picture up on my course homepage. Not just this course, many of them. All right, I'm babbling a little bit because I'm trying to get some of you to catch up mentally to the denial thing. Right? I guarantee, I've done this for 30 years, I guarantee that I was not understood with perfection in the last, 20 minutes of stuff. There's some of you who said, what is he talking about? Well, I'll babble a little bit to give you a chance to formulate a question. If you don't, you're on that river in Africa. Pretty good metaphor. You're cruising a river in Africa. If you're sitting there not getting it, you're paying me, you're paying SIs, you're paying people at the Thomas Rare Center to help you get it, and somehow you're not making forward progress on one of those routes. This is the first one. Say, Doc, I didn't get that thing you were just saying. Try to be as specific as you can. But if it's beam me up, Scotty, I'm not getting any of this, say that too, and I'll try to repeat myself in different words. I have to work on my fishing technique. All right, so you see this graph up here on the screen doesn't have the shift that might have caused that, right? But that would be the supply decrease. Increase, create a surplus, or a demand decrease. Okay, now excess demand, which I jumped into already with my graph here, that's where the supply goes down and the demand goes up, right? That's what I drew here, demand increase. Okay, so again, ponder your cruise on that river in Africa as you read this slide and see if you think that I've properly clarified what this means. Because see, if you could just download this off of your BB Learn module and read it and understand it without any explanation, well, then probably that's what you ought to do, given your time has an opportunity cost. But if you read that, you go, huh. You're still going to probably go, huh, a week from today when you're studying for the test. Needs clarification. Okay, if the price is below where it eventually will settle, right? There's a shortage, right? Below where it eventually will settle. Yes, it was here at first. Demand increased. Now it's below where it eventually will settle. It'll increase. Because sellers like making more money when they can get it a higher price, and they do that. And some of the buyers at the margin say, nah, PE 0, that was okay. I was willing to buy at that price. PE 1, now it's too much money. I'm going to switch to a consumption substitute. Or do without whatever this is completely. See, that's what's going on here on this arrow right here. Some folks, the marginal buyers, deciding either to do without whatever this product does for them, heats them, cools them, entertains them, whatever. And some switching to consumption substitutes, things that can be used instead to meet similar wants. I'm tempted to revise some of this stuff, but I'll leave it in here as perspective. Remember, these slides were written by the authors a few years ago. I keep talking about higher prices. Thank goodness for the free enterprise system. Because you see, what happened was those high prices, okay, from a few years ago, historically very high, around $4 a gallon. What did that do? That induced folks to get their drilling rigs and poke holes all over West Texas and North Texas and South Texas and Central Texas. and Oklahoma and Wyoming and Alaska and all over the place, all over the world. And they were successful. And it prompted somebody else a few years ago to pull out their calculator and computer and whatever and to figure out how to get oil out of the ground that we knew was there, but it was too expensive. And so they discovered fracking and horizontal drilling. So now, even with demand worldwide at historic highs, 1.3 billion people in China are discovering automobiles and having the money to buy them. And 1 billion people in India, same thing. And just all of a sudden, their demand is added. Despite that, gasoline prices are now about 60% of what they were when this slide was written. Okay, so anyway, if higher gasoline prices did lead to a decrease in the demand for SUVs somewhat, they do to sell trucks and SUVs, you'll get a better deal on them, right? They won't be moving off the car lot as fast. What's available's got to move out to make room for next year's inventory, right? It's not doing the dealer or the manufacturer any good sitting there getting beat up by the weather, so they lower the prices and get them out of there. And then General Motors and Ford and Chrysler and so on, they sit there sharpening their pencils and thinking, wow, we had to really lower the prices of those to move those out. Maybe we won't make as many next year, right? So we won't have to do that again. Okay, so the price that it takes to ration out what's available is the input to next year's or month or however the long run is, however long it takes to make more, and a key input into deciding how much to make in the future. Okay, so moving right along. All right, we've talked about consumer surplus and producer surplus individually as part of the demand and supply discussion. Now we can talk about them together. Okay, I'll leave that up there. Okay, we have our seller opportunity cost reflected by the supply. And go back to the concrete examples. And I was going to put 80-pound bag, because that's usually what I buy it in. A ton is such a nice, convenient word. It's short. Okay, so just get it all set out there so that it's not a mystery what's going on here, or at least less of one. All right, so there's our demand based on the 7 shifters, and there's potential shifters, things that will move this demand line. Here's the supply based on the 7 shifters there. Okay, so the equilibrium price settles in, and we'll say, for the purposes of discussion, that the shifters aren't going to do anything for a while. Okay, so now the trade is occurring at this price, and all but the marginal buyer and seller are doing really well at that price. What is it? Well, marginal seller. Why is this the equilibrium quantity? Okay, let's just give it a number. Because the 100th ton per year is the last one that can be sold for enough to cover the opportunity cost. If you're not thinking that to yourself when you're studying this and just memorizing a picture, again, I would submit that whatever it is you're doing and whatever it's taking time away from other things is not studying. Okay? You've got to be thinking about what's going on here, not just trying to, go where the intersection is and there's the price. Yeah, that'll get you some questions right, but it won't get you much better at intellectually at economics. All right, so the 100 is the equilibrium quantity because the 100th ton per year has an opportunity cost that is about the same as somebody's willingness to pay. All the other buyers and sellers are reaping pretty good gains from trade because the other buyers' willingness to pay is well above the other seller's opportunity cost. Okay, so again, that's where the consumer surplus comes in, and then the producer surplus. Okay, nothing's changed from what it was last week. It's just on the same graph together now. Yes, you can memorize this, and that'll work to some extent. The thing that it doesn't work for is once you're under test pressure, there's a bunch of things you got to remember, and your brain is going to scramble it. Okay? Producer surplus. The difference between what somebody earns when they sell it and their opportunity cost. See, that's the explanation of it. That's the understanding of what it is. Yes, it's the triangle between price and supply. That's how you estimate it. That's the unfulfilling thing that you might decide to memorize and might work, and it might not, because wait a minute, which one is that? And whoops, time's running. Question, yes.
I think I understand it, but I don't see how it would be applied to anything.
Oh. Well, for example, if you think about international trade, which we did back in Chapter 2, you can use a supply and demand graph to prove that the gainers gain more than the losers lose. Okay? So, for example, if you eliminate an import tariff, the increase in consumer surplus will be more than the reduction in producer surplus. Okay? So you can show that. And you can show something generally that comes up in this chapter, namely that the gains from trade are maximized by leaving the market alone. Any interference with it means that there'll be a loss in gains from trade. It's called a deadweight loss, efficiency loss sometimes. I love that. See, not bad. Well, do your Sam Donaldson. Keep at it. I gave it my best shot. I know that doesn't work sometimes.
Like, I guess in test format, I don't know how it would be. I would be quizzed on it to make sure I understand it. Because, like, the words make sense, but like, if I were to try to.
Oh, I'm not going to ask you to memorize the definition of consumer surplus or producer surplus. No, I'll put a graph on the exam and say at the market equilibrium, what's the producer surplus?
There's no word problem that if, like, Sally has this person.
Well, I think what just said is a word problem. You first got to know what the market equilibrium is. And then you have to know what the concept is of producer surplus and consumer surplus to find what calculation to make in the graph. And you've got to have thought about it quite a bit, otherwise it'll take you too long. You'll spend too much time on the question and you'll be penalized that way. So, the word problem that's not going to be on there is which one of the following is the definition of consumer surplus? No. That encourages memorization, and I try not to do that. So the word problem, the word problem for now, it can be more complicated than what I just said, and maybe later in the course it is. But for right now, I'm interested in you understanding the consumer and producer surplus based on just a regular market equilibrium. Later on, it might say if the demand increases, or if the government does such and such policy, what happens to the producer surplus or consumer surplus, like the trade situation. That'll come up in a couple of chapters. Yeah, it might say use consumer surplus or producer surplus to show that there are gains from free trade versus protectionism. I mean, whoa. Yeah, well, we haven't introduced some of those terms yet. We will. Good. Excellent. See, I prefer to spend if I could come in here and the whole period would be spent just on Q&A, that would be great. But they do pay me to do something here for 75 minutes every day, so if there's no questions, I'm going to talk. But I would prefer more of that massively over semi-reading, sort of clarifying, guessing what you don't get, with these PowerPoint slides. Because I've been doing this a long time. My guesses are pretty good, but. No. Tyler, right? Yes. I'm going to learn a few names in here. Especially the people that are nice enough to sit close up. I'm going to try really hard because I appreciate you sitting closer. No, I mean that's the quick answer. The only way they're going to be about the same size is if the demand and supply line have the same slope. But that's a rare. I mean, probably for me just putting it up here, they have about the same slope. But it's easy. See, and again, this is one of the things that you want to do to get this concept, to learn it. Okay, in Cajun exploration. Right? So you say, okay, well, what if it looks like this? So you're exploring. P in your Q, price per unit, not to write it out, but think it for a second. Quantity per week or per year, whatever. Okay, so let's draw a supply line. It's a little flatter than there. Okay, and then we'll draw the demand line a little steeper than before, but we want to make sure it touches up here so we can get it all in there. Okay, so see, what does this mean in economics terms? It means that the opportunity costs of production don't change very much as you increase output, right? That's what the supply line, right? It starts here and it's only this much higher when we get all the way to this quantity, right? The cost per unit going up. And on the demand side, it's pretty steep. It says the willingness to pay for this good, kind of a variety is the spice of life thing, goes down pretty fast as more of it is produced. You know, one of them you want really bad, and you've got one, you think, do I want another one? Nah, one's enough. That kind of thing. Kind of like if you're partying, one beer, cool. 2 beers, you know, you got to drive somewhere, maybe not. Okay? The problem with alcohol is it eliminates one of the key assumptions of economics, namely rational behavior. Right? You get a couple of those in you, and then you have more because you're no longer rational. If you were still rational, you'd say, that was enough. All right. More questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, let me do that middle piece there. Why am I going? So it goes this way. Well, all right. So what does that middle phrase there mean? Let's suppose for some reason that the quantity is constrained to be only this much. Well, in fact, let's talk about a good reason for it to be constrained about that. Comes up later in the semester, but you know, repetition is good. Taxes, okay? A tax goes in, and that reduces the supply of the good, right? Right? The less is going to be available at any given price if you put a tax on the good than before. Okay, so now that's the new quantity. That had been the old quantity. At this quantity, there's additional output that is worth to somebody more than it costs somebody else to produce it. Lost, foregone, unexploited gains from trade, whatever term you want to use. Okay? Let's put some numbers on this again. Let's say this 80, this is 90. 10 additional tons per year would be worth to somebody more than it would cost somebody else to produce it. Okay? So gains from trade are lost. Some of it, you know, consumer surplus, some of it producer surplus. Dead weight loss. Why does that happen with taxation? Well, because with taxation, somebody's paying way more than somebody else is getting after they pay their taxes. Right? So that difference says, hey, don't buy this stuff unless it's worth to you at least $11. And the tax is $3 a unit. So the seller says, okay, here's my 11, 3 goes to the government, they get 8, and they say at 8, that's all I'm making is this many. Okay, and the buyer says, well, if I've got to pay 11, at 11, that's all I'm buying. Well, there's additional output that would be worth a little less than 11 to somebody and cost a little more than 8 for somebody to produce, but still the gains from trade to be had. See, that's one of the reasons that taxes are bad for the economy. It isn't just that the money's being taken from somebody and put in the treasury to pay for things. It's that there's an efficiency loss from taxing goods. Now, taxing bads, that is what we call a double dividend.
Does that essentially eliminate marginal buyers and sellers?
It eventually does. Yes, very good. Yeah, see, the long run, this is the short run again, so I'm glad to give me a chance to do that. This is the short run effect. The long run effect is some of the sellers get out of the business because they're not making as much money at 8 as they used to be. Let's say it's right in the middle at $9.50. Okay, and so some of the marginal sellers says at $9.50 I was making it. At 8 I can't make it anymore. So they get out of the business. That causes a further shift in supply, and as a result, the tax fully impacts the buyer rather than in the short run. You see, in the short run, the tax is being shared by buyer and seller. In the short run, the price is a little lower to the seller and a little higher to the buyer than it used to be. But the later shift, the marginal seller saying, I got to get out of here and do something else, will restore the original $9.50 net price. So probably the price in the long run will go up to $12.50. Right, with the exit of the marginal sellers. Some of that's beyond what's going to be on the test a week from today. But that's fine, because it's not beyond what we're going to do eventually. But it is beyond what's on Tuesday. Okay, unexploited gains from trade if for some reason the market equilibrium is less or more than what would be the no interference equilibrium. We'll do what happens with more. Now, so here's the graph that does this only without the reason for why the quantity would be at 24 rather than at 65. Okay, so if you wanted to draw an S through where 57 hits the demand line and say, okay, this happened because of higher taxes, do that if that helps you understand it. Because some students will look at this, I know from experience, and say, well, why on earth did the quantity get down to 24 in the first place? Why didn't it stay at 65? Well, something had to shift it. Okay, taxes would be a good explanation, right? There's plenty of those around. Yes?
What do you mean by satisfied wants at the top of that?
Oh, unsatisfied wants. Oh, okay, good question. That's the same thing as this thing. Here's some quantity, which is it's there. Somebody's willing to pay prices higher than $9.50 for some additional concrete. Sorry, I didn't put the concrete up here. Okay, so you make a really good point because below the equilibrium, those are wants too. Those are unsatisfied. Right? So in other words, if you go past 65, the demand line still tells you unsatisfied wants all the way beyond the amount purchased. It's just those wants are so low value to the buyers that they can't convince any sellers to meet it for them at a price they're willing to pay. But, sorry, I got a little away from your question. That red is the same thing as this, and it says that there's some wants out there that could profitably and efficiently be met. Okay, because there is additional output available at an opportunity cost below what somebody's willing to pay for it. And in the case of the red, there are considerable gains from trade to be had. And that's one of the problems with taxation of goods, is that it does create that efficiency loss to the economy. Now, it's bad enough that money's being taken out of your pocket, right, and moved to some other place, but we value the things that the government makes up to a point more than we value the other things we could have purchased with our money, like safety, right, Army and Navy to protect us from all the bad people around the world, Air Force. But still, people don't like to pay taxes, and so they will stop doing some things that they otherwise would do, but for the tax effect on the price of the good. Good. All right. More Q&A. Okay, so here's the slide. And you think, why on earth would this happen? Why would we make way more than the 65? Why would we make the 95? Well, Google farm price supports, and you'll have that answer. I'm trying to remember. I know in one of my other courses we spend a chapter talking about that. In this course, my brain's a little fried. I can't remember if that comes up as an example later on. But anyway, farm price supports, which means the government says that some farmers are not able to get by on the market equilibrium price. Let's guarantee them a higher price than the market equilibrium price, and to make sure that the market mechanism doesn't push down the price once they produce more, which they're going to do. Price support means the government's got to buy the excess stuff. Okay, so if we were to institute a law that said you're going to be able to sell this stuff for $50 for sure, a price floor to the producer, they will produce 95 million barrels per day in this case, a producer of oil. Okay? And every million barrels per day past 65, kind of awkward term, tons is so much better, huh? Anyway, every unit of output past 65, the opportunity cost is more than what it's worth to somebody. It's not worth less. It's just not worth as much as it's costing. The resources that are used to make the last 30 million barrels per day from 65 to 95 would be more valuable producing something else. That's what the supply line being above the demand line past 65 says. The resources involved in making more than 65 million barrels per day would be better used making other things. That's the opportunity cost concept. And marginal cost, marginal opportunity cost is the information that's contained on a supply line. what it would cost, what we would give up to make more of this stuff. Okay, we give up the opportunity to make other stuff. See, think of the price, that $30 price is a hurdle. If you want to be a seller of that stuff, you got to be below that. Right? You've got to figure out some way to produce, or you're not going to make it. If you can produce it, but it's going to cost you more than 30, then go find something else to do. Be a low opportunity cost producer, or not be there at all. And likewise, on the buyer side, you got to outbid the other buyers. You know, it's not worth the $30, right? The equilibrium $30 to you. Spend your money on something else. Okay, so I jumped ahead on this slide previously. The market equilibrium price maximizes the gains from trade. Okay, total surplus is another term for gains from trade. Consumer surplus plus producer surplus, gains from trade, total surplus. Two words that mean the same thing. Two terms that mean the same thing. Okay, and I did say this one. I think this is another one that I added to what's posted on your BB Learn. Right? PowerPoints are there for you to print and look at. At any price other than the equilibrium, there is less exchange. Okay, so if you didn't write it down when I said it earlier, now there it is, written down for you. Kind of a profound statement anyway that says, doesn't matter how well-intentioned price ceilings or price floors are, or what other benefits that they may have. Buyers will have less at a price other than the one determined by the market at the equilibrium. You say, but Doc, how are the buyers going to have less if the price is set lower? There won't be as much available for them to buy. Whenever the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are not equal, which takes a price control for that condition to persist. Okay, whenever the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are not equal, the lesser of the two is the amount actually purchased. Whenever the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are not equal, the lesser of the two is the amount actually purchased. I'd love to buy a nice new BMW 7 Series 20,000. No sweat. My quantity demanded is way above the amount that will be available at that price. The fact that I'm willing to pay that for that, I don't own one of those because the actual price prevailing is $90,000. My quantity demanded at that price is zero. Okay, whenever the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are not equal, it's the lesser of the two. It's the amount actually purchased. Okay, so this slide's a little more clear than the other one, not a fault of the previous slide. Non-buyers, I mean, they're ready to be buyers. Right, the lower end of the demand line, they're ready to be buyers at a lower price. You know, they're bargain hunters. At the current price, nah. But lower price, yeah, I'm there. Okay, and then the non-sellers. There are resources out there ready to make more of something. They're doing something else right now. But at a higher price, they'll move into making the oil in this case of this graph. The buyers that are in the market and the sellers that are in the market, where it says buyers and sellers up to the 65 equilibrium quantity, are the buyers that want it the most and the sellers with the lowest opportunity cost. Again, it didn't take any commissars or central planners or Wizard of Oz or anybody to divine any of this. It happens all by itself. That's the magic of it. That's the miracle of it. It's like a lot of us operating a car. We have no idea how it works. But boy, turn the key, and I mean, other than the brake pedal and accelerator, but it does. Thankfully, same thing with markets. Most of us have, watch the Milton Friedman pencil when I get that posted, hopefully later today. How on earth did all these materials get together in something I can buy for $0.25? Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing, all by the price system. Didn't take anybody passing a law or an edict to send rubber, to the pencil factory and send graphite. No, just the price system. People pursuing self-interest, saying, at that price, I'll sell that American pencil factory some graphite. Sure. At that price, yeah, I'll send them some rubber to make the eraser. Sure. Lower price, never mind. Forget about it. That price, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, well, price of cars goes up. Some folks will switch to buses. Okay? Okay, or, then maybe they have a 2-car family, they'll go down to a 1-car family. Late 1990, I remember that. When I first purchased where I live now, they were digging up the streets all over the place, putting down those cables. I didn't realize they put in too many, but apparently they did. Okay, so lower prices. Okay, so anytime there's a change in supply or demand, see, it says on some of the slides, it says the equilibrium is stable. Well, yeah, stable as long as there's not any one of the shifts. Right? As long as there's no changes in tastes and preferences or income or weather that's related to either buying or selling or prices of other related goods. Yeah, as long as none of those things change, it's stable, but they're not all that stable because those things do change frequently. Okay, and if we can predict those things in advance, a lot of you are in here because you're planning business careers, you better predict some of those in advance, right? Because it involves in being ready to meet the demand or not having too much supply, like this second bullet there, when it arrives. And as I think I mentioned my example with the Winnebagos, I lived in Hawaii, I gave that example, right? Yeah, if I just woke up in a different time zone. But for those of you who did wake up in the right time zone, you didn't have a good command of the shifters. Well, most of you weren't alive when that happened, but if you had been, if you had good command of the shifters, man, you could have almost doubled your money if you'd been awake first thing in the morning, turned the radio on, and the price of Winnebagos was $10 a share, and later the same day it was at 17. Because their consumption complements for gasoline. It was a big shift predicted for the demand for recreational vehicles, Winnebagos among others. And as a result, the price was competed up from $10 a share for Winnebago stock up to 17 later in the same day. That was in the 1980s. Okay. I think I pretty much covered this already, but read it real quick and decide. Okay, supply increases create surpluses, excess supply. Okay, price falls, bringing a new equilibrium. Okay, and the quantity increases. Okay, well, I shouldn't assume. Let me just go ahead and put it up here. So, especially in the case of this one, we can take a moment to emphasize that a supply increase is this. The line shifting to the right, which looks like it goes down, but going to the right is what matters. Price per unit. Okay, so initially, here's our initial price. Stable until this shift occurred. Now there's excess supply. Okay. Suddenly there's more available at that price than there used to be. Right? That's all the communication the sellers need. They don't need a phone call from somebody that says, hey, wake up, we invented fracking, pretty soon there's going to be a lot more oil available at this price. No, they see their ability to sell at this price more than meet the demand. Right? They're not selling it as fast as that they're producing it, and they're going to run out of places to put it. Okay, well, so price starts to come down. And with that, somewhat less is made available, and somewhat increased quantity demanded, and a new equilibrium is found. Quantity will rise, price will fall, and the adjustment is pretty fast. But it's not like that. It's not like one day the price is one thing and the next day it's something else. It goes down gradually. Think of being a seller. I mean, you don't really want to lower your prices all that bad, right? I mean, so you're going to be kind of hesitating about it. And if it's higher prices, same thing. Yeah, you might want your price to be a lot higher. Sure, you make a lot more money if it still sells. But if you jump ahead of your competitors, you're not going to sell anything, right? So you just kind of raise and lower slowly until it re-establishes equilibrium. Okay, so there you go. There's the graph that I just drew. Okay, new demand line, same thing. I think I drew that one already over here. On the right, again, sufficient for questions. Okay, so let's see how we're doing here. Okay, flooding in Iowa destroys some of the corn and soybean crop. What will happen to the price and quantity for these crops? Well, that's a supply decrease. The line shifts to the left. There'll be a shortage at the original price, and that shortage will be all the message that anybody needs to start raising the price of what's left, right? To ration out what's available, right? The price has got to go up so that only the folks that want it the most are the ones that will end up getting it, right? We raise the price to exclude by their own voluntary actions, not forcibly exclude, but they step aside as the price rises. Those who value it the least say, corn and soybean like it, that don't love it, I'll go buy something else. Okay, they step aside at the higher price. Okay, so again, that's that third slide. The increase in gasoline prices, well, now the Priuses are probably suffering as a result of the lower gasoline prices. I don't know, there may be a reason. You know, the other day I was speculating about liquid natural gas tankers. I had no idea. But for a long time they were building those because we were importing natural gas from other places. And the price was so high that it was worth building boats that you could contain pressurized gas on for a journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Not to mention the Indian Ocean first, because it had to come all the way around from the Middle East. And so I speculated. I said, boy, I bet those folks that built those are suffering now. Somebody did their thing on their computer. No, they're booming. Why is that? Because now we're using to export natural gas. That's an amazing thing. They lucked out that it switched so totally that now we can use the boats we expected to use to bring in natural gas at high prices. Now we're making money selling natural gas to other places. See if there's one more good ending point here. We'll start there next time. Okay, this will